Somebody recently asked me why I don't clap.
Why don't you clap?
Because you're getting so much better at it. There it is. We're done. This is another episode of the Carmudgeon Show. My name is Jason Cammisa.
I am Derek Tam-Scott.
And to no one's surprise, we have two German hot hatches behind us. But to perhaps someone's surprise, we're going to talk about an American hot hatch. Also,
an American hot hatch? Mm-hmm. The Dodge Omni
GLHS.
Yes. Have you ever driven one?
No.
Neither have I.
Damn.
I'm curious.
Okay, so we're not going to talk about that. We are going to talk about
something
Jeep
else.
Cherokee.
Yes. Altogether. Obviously a hot hatch.
Yeah, a rear drive, straight six, manual transmission.
Oh, that's always what I associate with hot hatches, straight sixes.
Straight six and rear drive. Yeah, because hot hatches would be perfect if they had straight six and rear drive, i.e.
BMW 1 series. That wasn't sold here.
Damn it.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to have to revise this whole episode now that we've
okay,
already
so we're
recorded
gonna. Jason's going to make the case for why the original Jeep Cherokee was a hot hatch, despite having live axles at both ends. And we're going to talk about various generations of GTIs and how they compare against one another, and the fun quotient of various generations.
Which is the best generation Volkswagen GTI of all time? Dun, dun, dun.
All right,
bye.
We will return to you after the jingle.
I already clapped. You don't have to do it.
I don't clap.
This is
clap.
weird. Can you clap again?
Oh, that was the best one I've ever done. Amazing. Good thing I did that.
I wonder if they'll notice that we're sponsored in this episode.
I doubt it.
You doubt it? You don't think this will be their sign?
People on YouTube will maybe be able to see that it is in fact sponsored. This episode of the Carmudgeon Show, sponsored by Viper Chair, which is very much not computer generated and is sitting on the table.
Sitting under the table.
Sitting on the table.
Yeah. Last episode, I think it was last episode, several episodes ago, we had the chair here on the table. Excuse me. And there were a whole bunch of comments of people that thought it was CGI'd there, and they were like shook when you got up and just removed the CGI chair. No, it's really here. I can touch it. I can spin it around. And this is Viper Chair.
Which is proudly made in the United States.
Yes, family-owned company made in Green Bay, Wisconsin. I hope they appreciate my correct pronunciation of that.
Yeah, that's how the state is pronounced.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You can't go to a French person and expect them to call it Paris.
No.
It's Paris,
yes.
And this is Wisconsin.
Or Chevrolet.
Viper aimed to find the shop chair that sucked and make it unsuck, and re-engineered that. And they're continuing to re-engineer and remanufacture all of the other garage tools that suck. Somebody's worse.
Chairs, stools, creepers, fans, tool cart, and wheel dollies are coming. That's exciting. As we prepare for Pebble Beach, we have a car going to be shown at Pebble Beach. It has 87 miles on the odometer.
Oh, God.
And the people who are showing it are like, please, when you move it around, use wheel dollies. We don't want additional miles from pushing it.
Around the shop.
The car's from 1971. Like when it goes out to the transporter, they're like, so anyway, that's my wheel dolly story.
That's amazing.
Anyway.
But these are made with very high quality casters and all actual metal. I don't think I see any plastic on this. Maybe the wheels are rubberized plastic, but that's it.
It's certainly that clear when you try to pick it up.
And I'm going to have to do that this episode.
It's hefty.
Yeah. Don't forget to go to viperindustrial.com and use a coupon code Carmudgeon for $50 off.
And between 4/11 and 6/22, that's in this time frame now, Viper is giving away a 2021 Python Green Porsche GT4.
Not a Viper Green.
Not
GT4.
Viper Green, as we often discuss. Every $5 you spend at viperindustrial.com gets you entered into a chance to win the GT4 plus $15,000 of cash to spend on tires and fuel for your racetrack.
Shaft bearings?
No. That's not a 718 problem.
Okay, I'm going to remove this well-built and heavy chair.
Don't hurt yourself.
I'm very badly injured.
I'm not dead. I'm just very badly injured.
You shot me right in the arm. Oh, God, I need to watch Austin Powers again.
It hasn't aged that well. It was very hilarious when it came out. There's some stuff where you watch it now, you're like, ooh.
Really?
Wow.
Because it's offensive or because it's not funny?
You're just like, wow, this is of the time. In the same way that, I don't know, Airplane has some moments like that too. They remain hilarious, but very irreverent.
I watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, the first one, recently. Did we talk about this in the podcast? Or did I just tell you this?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
And I think I told you in person anyway. But It held up to me. My boss said he watched it. He was like, it just wasn't funny. I'm sorry, Jim Carrey's physical comedy will never not be funny. It's so stupid. And I have a feeling I have watched as inspiration for some of the script writing stuff that we've done. I've watched the opening sequence, the dance number in Austin Powers a couple times. And I just want to do a musical number at some point in an Icons episode.
You're just looking for a way to write that in.
Yeah, it was just, that movie started and within 1.9 seconds, you were in.
Yes.
You were in, you were smiling, you were laughing. It was beautifully done.
Thank you, Quincy Jones, also.
Yes, that is a Quincy Jones song. Okay. We are
not talking about that this episode. We're not even talking about Jaguars or Jaguars.
We're barely going to talk about the two cars that are behind us, which are two Volkswagen GTIs.
Aren't we? We are going to talk mostly about them.
I just like to mess with you on camera. Like for those of you who didn't realize, I always start talking and Derek realizes as I'm talking that the cameras are rolling and it's now time. So if he's always sort of surprised post logo sequence that like
on
we're
the
recording,
back foot.
It's because I do that on purpose. Because I'm mean.
So this episode is about the Golf GTI. I have not consumed all generations of the GTI. I think the earliest GTI I've driven is probably a Mark IV.
Well, I've driven
your Scirocco and your Cabby, which are Mark I's,
GTI.
Functionally, technically.
But can I talk first about how we got here to this episode?
Please.
How we both physically got. We never know what we're going to pull up. We don't talk ever.
We don't coordinate.
We don't speak to each other. That's it. This is all we're feigned. No, we don't coordinate. So we both showed up today in GTIs. But I wanted to talk about last Thursday's Revelations episode that went live, which is Jeep Cherokee.
Oh, I'm looking forward to the connection you're about to draw between GTI and Jeep Cherokee.
Okay. So the original XJ Jeep Cherokee is how much longer or shorter than the Mark 8 Volkswagen GTI?
1.3 inches shorter.
3.4, 3.6, 3.5 inches shorter. It is shorter than a Mark 8 GTI and the same width. And it has a smaller wheelbase. It's a smaller car than a Mark 8.
Well, how about height?
Whatever.
Okay.
I didn't bother looking at so the one that we had in the studio to shoot, which was a really nice late example.
That was a facelift one, right? Or second generation, I guess.
I think it's last year. Not second. It's not really a generational change.
They have different. I think most of the sheet metal, maybe the doors are the same.
Yeah.
In the greenhouse.
It was
a
the
facelift. Fenders and lights and all that stuff are different.
Were different, yeah. And they sort of rounded their tail. The tailgate was no longer made out of fiberglass, for example. The early cars were. Anyway, it was a late example, and it was lifted, which it looks great and drives great. It was a little unfortunate for the purpose of the episode.
Narrative, which you are currently building.
Because it's actually small. And it was, more importantly, I don't think most people realize.
But everything was smaller then.
Everything?
All cars, 3 Series
versus
were
today,
much smaller than today's 3 Series. And so proportionally, so now you have to do a detailed analysis about what percentage of the size of a Jeep is the BMW 3 Series back then and whether that has changed, how that's changed.
I think far
today.
more significant was the fact that the Cherokee was the replacement for the Wagoneer. So the Wagoneer was that full frame, big wood paneled thing. The one that we have in here is...
Was it?
Yeah.
The Grand Wagoneer?
Aha! The Wagoneer was renamed to be the Grand Wagoneer because there was an XJ Cherokee that was called the Wagoneer. Mm-hmm. So
yes,
there were different
the one
packages.
That has
there was Cherokee Chief,
fake wood on the
stacked
side.
headlights. It was
yes.
Not my style,
preferred aesthetic.
Yes, but yeah. So the Wagoneer was to become the Wagoneer and Cherokee. The Wagoneer was the top spec model.
The Wagoneer was basically the Range Rover in the sense that it was the Jeep guts with a more useful civilized body.
Wagon body on it, exactly.
Yes.
But
so Land Rover Defender, Land Rover series to Range Rover is Wagoneer to Jeep.
Well, right,
what is now the Wrangler,
exactly,
but was
Wrangler,
back then the
CJ.
CJ.
Yeah, so the Wagoneer was not supposed to be continued. It was supposed to die. XJ Wagoneer, which we know as Cherokee, the whole project started in 1978, fuel crisis, downsizing, all that other happy, miserable time. And when the car was finally ready for production in 1982, somebody at AMC realized that there was still a market for the bigger car, so they kept the bigger car, renamed it Grand Wagoneer so that it didn't step on the XJ Wagoneer.
The Wagoneer trim of the XJ,
Cherokee.
which was the top line.
Which is top spec, yeah. It was the luxury pack. They're Detroit, so I get to call it package. That happened again, by the way, at the end of the Cherokee's life, because nearing the end of the Cherokee's life, it was to be replaced by what we now know as the Grand Cherokee. Mm-hmm. But there was still so much demand for the Cherokee that they kept them both and renamed its replacement the Grand Cherokee. So this sort of grand and petite, if I made a little bit of joke in the video, Cherokee and Wagoneer, it happened twice. And the Cherokee wound up in production for 17 years, which is kind of wild.
Until 2001. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then it would be 19 years. Because I think it was 82. Oh, no, it was 82. It showed 84 production. Whatever. I don't remember numbers. I did this research entire days ago. It's been months. But yeah, it was actually an interesting story. And the part I don't think I had realized is how much of an influence Renault had on the Cherokee. Renault had controlling interest in AMC by the end of the development process, and they had a lot to say about the suspension tuning. And I think that what made the Cherokee different from every other SUV on the market, other than that it was packaging first, it was the only four-door compact SUV you can get. Everything else is stupidly a two-door. So they went to great lengths to have this thing be a usable station wagon in an SUV form. But the emphasis was actually on-road drivability, comfort, and handling, which no one had done before.
Correct. So if you wanted to describe the big innovation, you would characterize it as that?
Yeah.
The Range Rover, was supposed to be that also, to be fair. They called it a car for all seasons, and they put coil spring suspension with self-leveling in the back, which was like a big deal. And it had enough power to go, maybe 90 or 100 miles an hour, which was a big deal in the early 70s.
The Range Rover also didn't exist in the U.S. at the time.
Correct. The Range Rover did not make its U.S. debut until 1987.
What year did the Range Rover come out? 70?
70.
70. I never remember 70 or 71. So it was a couple years old at this point. And it could therefore be, it is likely that it influenced the decisions over at AMC.
Yes, but also the Wagoneer's existence influenced the existence. The original Wagoneer's existence influenced the arrival of the Range Rover, because the Range Rover was inspired by the Wagoneer, the Bronco, all those station wagon things that had come out, Scout, International Scout, all the station wagon shaped things that were trucks underneath instead of being, no windows and no roof and all that kind of stuff that you associate with a CJ or a Series Land Rover or whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting, and also don't forget Land Cruiser, right? That also sort of happened a little bit later, a couple years later, but 67 was the FJ 55. And so this was all all of these car companies were coming to the same conclusions at the same time, but Cherokee was compact, fuel economy focused, and AMC didn't have enough money to develop a bunch of engines, so they developed one. And they took their old straight six, the 4.2, and they cut it down into a four-cylinder, made it a new 2.5-liter four-cylinder that was still push rod, but it had knock sensor. 1984, and could retard timing on individual cylinders. It was crazy advanced electronics on what was an ancient design. The 4-liter grew out of the 4-liter straight six that we all know associate with that car, grew out of the 2.5. I didn't realize this. So 4.2 was cut down into 4 cylinders as a 2.5, and then grew back into a 6-cylinder as a 4-liter, which we know is that, indestructible iron block, iron head, lasts 5 billion miles.
And then the intermediate engine?
There wasn't. Oh, there was one year, the 2.8-liter V6 from Chevy.
Yes.
It was a Chevy 2.8-liter V6, which actually, this was another interesting thing in the research. AMC refused to give horsepower numbers back in the day. Their policy was to not talk about horsepower. They weren't quite as lofty as the Brits, but they just wouldn't talk about it. And it's a good thing they didn't, because the 2.5 actually made
90
to begin with. They later rated it as, but it was actually the same. At the end, it was 120, which was more power than the 4.2 had made. And at the beginning, the 4.0 made more power than the 5.9 V8 did.
The Grand Wagoneer.
And the Grand Wagoneer. Wagoneer, now named Grand Wagoneer.
Yes.
So they were battling. No wonder they didn't want to talk about horsepower when their new downsized engines were making, more horsepower than the old stuff.
The earliest memory that I possess that I know the date of is from when I was 2, and my mom bought a 1986 Cherokee.
Two-door or four-door?
Four-door.
Okay.
And that is the earliest memory that I actually know the date of.
Huh.
I was 2 years old. I remember going to pick it up from a nurse that she worked with, and her name was Ruth, and she gave me a cookie. And I remember all of this. And there was a Garfield with the suction cups in the window when we brought it home. I remember backing it into the garage at home when we came home from buying it. And that is the earliest memory I possess. It was a 5-speed manual, 86, with
2.5 liter.
2.5 liter. 2 FRV 486 was the license plate number.
Oh,
it had the California Sunset set plates on it.
So my sister's first car, have I ever talked about this on this?
I don't think so.
Podcast? Was an 86 Cherokee, 2.5 liter, auto tragic, 2-door, that she saw like parked in someone's driveway. It was a friend of my aunt's or something, and she had to have it. And I don't remember how we got it. Like my sister had some money saved up, and my dad added a couple $1,000. I think it was like $6,000 or something. And this thing left her for dead constantly. Her worst one was on the George Washington Bridge. It died. And we finally got it back from that. And it was like cooling system exploded. Like it was just, the car had sat for like years. Like at that point, it couldn't have been that many years. Like I thought it sat forever, but it was probably only 14 years old or whatever when we got it.
Oh, this thing was 3 years old when we got it.
It couldn't have been 14 years old. This would have been like 95, 96. So the car was only 10 years. Anyway, the transmission exploded on the GWB. That was the end. My dad bought her a new transmission for it. And then I flew to New York and I was doing something there. And I drove her to work so that I could use her truck while she was at work. And I was on this big hill sitting in traffic, just waiting for like everyone to make it through the stop sign. And there was this boom. And next thing I know, it doesn't go. But it also didn't have a working e-brake. So I was like, uh-oh. So and the car just doesn't go. It's in neutral. And I put it in park and it's still in neutral. Transmission physically exploded while I was sitting at idle. And so now everyone, of course, I was in White Plains, New York. Everyone is honking and screaming. And I'm like, go around me. I have the flashers on and everyone's, what the fuck are you doing? New Yorkers. And finally somebody stopped. And while he was screaming, I'm like, stop. I can't get out. I can't move. Like I can't do anything because I don't have park. I have no way of getting out of this car. And so he said he would go call the police in a tow truck for me, but actually got everyone to move away enough that I could back down into a ditch and push it up against a tree to wait for the tow truck. And I was like, that's it. And so like a couple months later, my sister asked me to come and get the Jeep and her 2 cats because she was going to live with my mom for a little while. And I was like, oh yeah, I'll do that. But I need the title while I have it just to make sure. And she's like, okay. So I drove it to Pittsburgh. I got a fucking speeding ticket on the way.
How did you get a speeding ticket in a 2.5 liter Jeep?
She had huge tires on it and the Speedo showed 67. And I got I got pulled over and I'm like, officer, I know I was doing 67. I've been matted for miles. Like that's all this fucking thing will do. And I was doing 78 or something. Whatever. Like it was way off. That ticket stuck. I went and fought it. There was a state-run speedometer testing facility in Pennsylvania. Apparently, there were 2 of them in the state. I drove 2 hours to one of them. They verified that I was telling the truth. The Speedo would have said 67 when I was doing 70, whatever I was. And the judge still gave me the ticket, that bitch. In fact, I hope she's dead. So I was very upset.
I would say
it was a 4-hour drive to go to defend myself from this ticket. And her point was, you should have known you were going that fast. And I'm like, how was I supposed to know? I just got in this thing. And she's like, really? You didn't know you were going fast? I'm like, I was in a shitbox Jeep. It felt fast.
Feels like fast at all speeds.
How am I supposed to know the difference? Long story. That I will. I still have that ticket. I wish nothing but the absolute worst on that judge. Anyway, so that was my first ever
ours wasn't that
roadside.
painful.
Hers was great afterward. So I got it home back to Pittsburgh and I sold it out from, I didn't tell her. I just signed the title, sold it to a cop, which then scared me because I'm like, this guy's going to come back and kill me because the truck broke constantly. And then bought her a Sentra SE with the money. And I added some money and I did brakes on it, whatever. So I think we've used that picture in the past, the little red Sentra. It's like SER without the
R.
Yeah. Anyway,
With less
so
R.
my first ever breakdown with a driver's license was in a 2.5 liter Cherokee.
I never drove it. It was like her daily transport basically until 94, so 5 years. And it had like 120. It started getting expensive to keep going. It was just sort of normal old car stuff, like the exhaust system rusted out and stuff like that. But I remember her being annoyed by it being old and tired and just expensive to keep
and
going.
you were 7 at this point when she got rid of it?
Yes, I was 7 when she got rid of it, and she traded it in towards. She put like a stereo that was more expensive than the Jeep in, and then she took that out and it ended up in another car, and then she traded the Jeep in on a Range Rover Classic in 1994.
Same basic recipe.
Yeah, so we took it everywhere. I mean, we went to Tahoe and Yosemite, and then the nice thing then we've talked about chain control recently was that if you had 4-wheel drive and snow tires, which much fewer cars did back then you could sort of fuck right off and pass chain control. And she just didn't want to have to stop at chain control. That's we would go up to Tahoe quite frequently. So it was that was why she had that thing.
I've always had a soft spot for those things, mostly because of how they looked and the fact that it was a 4
color
liter
was
straight six.
Your sister's?
Black. So it had originally been like German taxi beige yellow, and they sprayed it black. So, but it was black, and they made it look like the limited. So all I want is a limited. Like I still want one with the gold wheels and the pinstripe and whatever. I thought they were so great looking.
Ours had steel wheels, and it was burgundy. It was like dark red metallic, and the interior was dark red, and then the inserts were also fabric, like white and red checked fabric inserts with burgundy vinyl. And I remember when I was a kid, I walked up to this thing. They're on the rocker panels, which are just exposed metal. There were like paint drips from like the paint that stuck out like stalagmites. Sorry. And I was like, Mom, why does this car have these drips like this? And she said, it's not a very high quality car. And I was like, okay. That's all she said. She was like, that was her answer to me.
Mommy bought a piece of shit,
I was
Derek.
probably like 3 or 4 years old. But
cool.
yeah, it was mostly her daily transport, other than she saw an Audi 5000 on the side of the road with a for sale sign and bought it on the spot. It was like $2,000. And she's like, this thing's beautiful. I must have it. And then it was just an absolute shit heap because it was an 80s Audi. But yeah.
I don't think we've done an update since Nick Mercadante was in that seat over there.
Oh, yes. We should do that.
He did. I think we talked about on the podcast that he said, the belt was making some terrible noise. He used Haggerty.
He got stranded on the way home from recording Carmudgeon in his 1980s Audi. Which,
it's totally fine, really.
Standard Audi procedure.
It's apparently thrown that belt a couple more times.
Okay, so
he's doing pulleys.
The belt is not the problem. It sounds like the belt is a symptom.
The badge on the front of that Audi is the problem.
Oh yes, and the back, and on the wheels, and on the glass,
and the parts, the engine,
and all the parts. Yes.
But I do actually. So I the thumbnail for the episode. I haven't actually done it yet because
we're traveling through time and space.
Yeah, exactly. But the idea is that this really is America's favorite hot hatch. It is the size of a European hot hatch
now
from today, which is not. I mean, the Golf's still not that big, that much bigger than it was.
Yeah, but everything. I mean, if you compare it to a contemporary hot hatch, like you remember, like Suzuki Swifts and. Like Chevy Sprints and Mitsubishi Mirages and all those. Oh tiny. God, we're just coming up with these weird inserts for cars that nobody has even thought about.
Every time you say you got to go find a picture. So,
but all those like hot hatches or hatches. Cold hatches,
frozen.
All those hatches back then were very, very tiny, and so compared to them, the Jeep is big. But yes, compared to a modern hot hatch,
and it was genuinely fast. So the final iteration of that 4 liter,
the 4 liter,
in the Cherokee,
we should add.
Well, by the way, it was not slow with the 2.5. I mean, I remember that car being dangerously slow with the automatic. But when you look at contemporary road tests, it dusted everything, and it dusted the 6-cylinder versions of everything. It was the 4-cylinder was the same speed as the 2.8 liter V6. So it was a 2.5 4-cylinder and 2.8 V6. So it's not like they were that far away into displacement. But it was quick. It became a rocket at the end. So when the high output 4 liter came out was 89 or 90, somewhere very early 90s, I think, was right when GTI, which was Mark II, went from, it started out with a 1.8 liter 8 valve. Then it went from a 1.8 liter 16 valve to a 2-liter 16-valve.
Were these chronological or were these different trims?
There were the 8-valve stayed throughout, but the 16-valve came in a year later. So the 8-valve GTI was 85, 87 got 88, 87. So 6 months after the Scirocco 16-valve got a 1.8-liter 16-valve, and then I think it was 89 or 90 got the 2-liter 16-valve. So
a 2-liter Mark II 16-valve is like the holy grail of Mark II GTIs in terms of...
You can make your own determination. They had motorized seatbelts, or whatever. They had the
motor mouse.
Were they motored? They're motored on the Corrado. I don't remember. It's been so long. They might have just been fixed on the doors. But they had different seatbelts. They had the big bumpers, which some people like, some people don't. They were available in Montana Green, which makes me think they're the best. Either way, I mean, choose. The mirrors moved from the, now I'm going to have to find an insert of this. The rear view mirrors moved from the Mark I position, which is after the quarter windows. And they made a single piece window on the later cars, and it moved further over. So they made all these little detail changes. But more importantly, the Cherokee with an automatic. I couldn't find a single road test of the Cherokee 4-liter, 190 horsepower Sport with a manual. But all the automatics were 0.3 of a second quicker to 60 than a GTI, and then matched the
Which
GTI? 2-liter 16-valve.
Huh.
Matched the 2-liter 16-valve through the quarter mile, traveling faster.
So it was pulling.
So it was still pulling.
The GTI.
And so, I mean, that's some serious performance. And when they road tested the original, it outgripped a 190E Mercedes, which is nuts. Obviously not a 2.316.
Yes.
And it was a first year,
So after you did your driving video, was it poised or did it feel like...
lifted on mud tires. It is the single most exciting backroads driving experience we've ever caught on camera.
Really? More so than...
Taurus Show was nuts because Taurus Show had $40 tires on it.
Your previous benchmark, though? There was some car that you chose as your previous benchmark for...
Sierra Cosworth?
No. Longer ago than that. It was something weird.
Subaru XT that fell apart?
No, it was weird. It was good, though. Your benchmark was something that was good. I forget what it was.
850 CSI was amazing. E36 M3s were both amazing. That Renault R5 Turbo. I've done 44 episodes of Revelations now. Ooh. It's kind of crazy. I'm trying to think of what.
So on a back road, it was really excellent.
It was again lifted and
really amusing. Tires. Sorry,
I had a lot of fun.
Yes.
It wasn't by any stretch terrible, but it was probably not as well tuned as a stock one would have been. Mm-hmm. But it was still a lot of fun, and you realize that the thing actually rotates. You can do power oversteer with an open diff on a
that's
truck.
right. These had 4 low, 4 high, and 2
low. Yeah. So there were 2 4-wheel drive systems available. There was a part-time and a full-time. The industry's actual first full-time all-wheel drive system in an SUV, taken from the AMC Eagle. But this was a part-time. So they're rear drive until you pull the lever.
The shift on the fly
and
thing.
It genuinely moved up the hill. We were hauling ass. It sounded nice. It's got a little bit of an exhaust on it, that car, but it really just reminded me that this thing is kind of America's hot hatch. It's hot hatch shaped. It's just
so unitary construction, live rear end.
Live rear end, unitary, live both axles are solid.
Yes, right.
Coil springs in the front, leafs in the back, and that was all done for packaging because leaf springs stick out so far they needed a long front overhang, and they wanted space efficiency out of this new smaller SUV. You'll learn all about it in the episode, but people race these in lemons.
Yes, I have seen that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. So yeah, my thought was, wow, this really is 2,900 pound straight 6, 5-speed manual rear drive hot hatch.
With live rear axles at both ends.
Yeah, but it did it. I mean, it's not the steering is not exactly the most precise because you can't locate a live axle the way you can. But it was good. And then I was going to talk about that, and then we showed up in these today. So I think what we should do
is actual hot hatches.
Actual hot hatches. So I think we should pivot to tell everyone to go watch that episode. You should too, especially the driving sequence at the end. I mean, it wasn't I'm not going to get arrested over it, but it was the owner of that car is going to get a giggle when he watches what I did to his poor thing. But I have now spent 250 miles in that Mark 7 post doing a clutch or having a clutch done, I should say. And I have things to say about the Mark 7 GTI, which is sort of the high water mark as far as modernity, because Mark 8 is not as good. So let's keep it just to VWs because we could get like sidetracked with Peugeot 205s. And is there another hot hatch that like we should do a whole episode on?
I mean, there's all kinds of Renault products like the Clio Williams, which neither of us has ever driven. I haven't seen one in person, but everyone says that they're epic, and I believe them because they're people whom I trust. And coming from someone who owned a 205 GTI Rally, which is the super mega lightweight one, which was one of the most enjoyable drives I've ever had. That's the only 205 GTI I've driven.
One 205 GTI, and I liked it. Yeah. But, okay, so Mark 1s, you've driven both my Cabby and my Scirocco. They are mechanically identical to a Mark 1 GTI, just with twice the power. So the Mark 1 GTI in the US.
Oh, I drove the Mark 1 that we had on the Volkswagen shoot. Yeah, the US car.
The silver one.
Yeah.
With the super slow manual steering.
Yes.
Whatever. Did you drive it hard?
No. I just moved it around and maybe 3 or 4 corners on the track, but at sort of filming speeds, like with the Beetle. So
that car was magic on a mountain road. Like I genuinely was at 11 tenths with 1,000-foot drop. And I kept having to rein myself back in because the car was just so goddamn fun. And that's with no power. And that car had the worst sounding exhaust I've ever heard on any car in my life ever. And my cars. Cabby is closer in. Imagine the Cabby with 50 fewer horsepower, and that's a GTI. And structure.
I was just going to ask about structure.
Structure probably has 3 times the structural rigidity, so 3 times 0 is 0.
Yes. Okay.
So lift off oversteer, sort of neutral handling, adjustable handling.
Yes.
Engine dominates the whole experience because they're all long stroke, very vocal 4 cylinders that make really wonderful noises. Mark II is very much the same experience as Mark 1. I haven't. It's the generation I've probably driven the least, but to me they always strike me as a Mark 1 on steroids. Much stiffer structure, and
I really like looking at Mark IIs. I think they're very handsome.
Might be the prettiest of all. They're sort of certainly even with Mark 1s in terms of great looking
aesthetic appeal. Yeah.
And then we had Mark III. I had a Mark III Golf that I turned into a GTI VR6 4-door. You've driven Mark IIIs?
I don't think I've ever driven a Mark III Volkswagen. Corrado?
Close enough. Corrado VR6?
Yes, it was Corrado VR6, but I don't think I got out of 3rd gear or 2nd gear even.
I mean, you can put on Mark. It's all the same stuff. It's all so Corrado was actually anything in width was B series car, meaning Passat, and anything in length was A. So it was the length of a Golf, but the width of a Passat. But it's all exactly the same componentry. Mark III got too heavy for its own self.
Really?
Yeah.
But you do get the VR6.
Yes, which was way too heavy for itself. So your choice, unfortunately, in Mark III was either VR6, one of the best sounding engines of all time in my book, or the 2-point slow, as we've all called it, which are dead reliable, but they are.
This is not a GTI.
GTI, yeah.
It is a 2-point slow.
You had a GTI or a GTI VR6?
And the 2-point slow is an 8-valve?
8-valve.
I see.
115 horsepower, 115 pound-feet of torque. And was it 132? Whatever it was. Not a lot of power, not a rever, but they turned that original 1974 engine into a crossflow head at least for that. But it was still single cam, 2-valve, 115 horsepower, 2-liter.
And this was the base engine in subsequent Golfs, even when the new Beetle came out.
That 2-point slow lasted forever.
Yeah.
And again, it was literally the 1970s Audi engine, the Audi Volkswagen engine that continued through. Smooth enough. Got the job done, but they were not fast at all. VR6 was a revelation in terms of sound and speed because 172 horsepower in a hot hatch and 6 cylinders, which is just completely insane. Mark IV was a very different car.
Yeah, it's like a baby Audi.
Yeah, baby Audi, baby Mercedes. And in the US for Mark III, GTI meant 2-door. So they Volkswagen marketing kind of fucked everything up because
they were always in the U.S. until there were always two doors until the Mark IV.
Yes, but there should have been a Golf 2-door and a Golf 4-door and a GTI 2-door and a 4-door. And Mark III there was not. There is, if you wanted a 2-door, you got a GTI. And
I see. All two-door U.S. Golfs were GTIs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why the 2-point slow.
2-point slow, right? And so you're shitting on that name at that point. You know, like that shouldn't have had that. Mark IV is the same way. You could have so all the 2-doors were GTIs.
I had no idea. I never looked at that closely.
God, this is so long ago. But there was a GTI GLX, which was the VR6. Otherwise, it was a 1.8T, which I'm going to get hate on this. Unpopular opinion, worst engine Volkswagen Group has ever made. I just don't like port-injected turbos. It had 5 valves per cylinder and didn't breathe nearly as well as the previous 4-valve had from the 16-valve. And the idea there was you could, with turbochargers, you could have a little tiny turbo and have a lot of mid-range torque and not a lot of lag, or a big, huge turbo and have huge amounts of lag and huge top-end power. Somehow, the 1.8T had nothing. It had huge lag and then no top end. Perfectly lovely engine for like a Passat 1.8T automatic, for example. But they were just dead off boost. They didn't pull up top. They were just not great, and never sounded.
Was it from the like Saab 900 school of turbocharging?
It was should have been, but the Saabs, in terms of, you mean like all mid range?
Yeah.
But the Saabs had more character. They had just enough lag and enough like turbo noises to make them fun, and I never met a 1.8T that I liked. Like you could mod them, and a friend of mine was an APR dealer back in the day, and like they would just go for these bigger turbos, and like they literally couldn't make boost under 4,000, and then it was all over. Like you had from $5,000 to 6,500, and that was it.
So you think it was like a head design where they just weren't efficient at flowing gases?
I've seen enough people swap from a 1.8T head back to a 16-valve head and make more power. So
there you have it.
You're new to math.
Okay.
It's an unpopular opinion. A lot of people love that engine because as per usual with Volkswagen 4-cylinders, you can put 1 billion horsepower to them and they don't break. But charmless. And Mark IV just got luxury, and lost the plot, frankly. I mean, if you go back and look at all the reviews of Mark IV, they're like, this is not fun anymore.
It's just like driving a mini B5 Passat or or A4.
Yeah. In terms of, it's refined. It was a really nice car.
Yes,
but not,
well made.
Right.
It's probably the first well-made Volkswagen interior from what I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first. It was Piech. Piech took over as Mark III was floundering, and he was going to make sure that never happened again. And so they sold like the Dickens.
Yeah.
They broke all their sales records when Mark IV came out. And then we have Derek's Mark V.
Ew.
The Stay Puffed Marshmallow GTI.
Yeah, it's ugly.
I was a journalist when that came out, and we lost our collective minds because it was so ugly, but in equal measure, so fucking fun.
Yeah, compared to the Mark IV especially.
Well, it was a return to form.
Yes.
It was this car shouldn't be a luxury car. It needs to let your hair on fire.
Yeah. But they didn't lose, I think, forever gone was the sort of slipshod nature of Volkswagen interiors, especially. And so you still have like a fairly nice interior that, like with nice soft touch plastics on the dashboard, and even on this ratted out track car thing, the parts of the interior that are still there, you're like, oh, that's a nice looking dashboard and it's well made and has like a sort of perceived quality, a slight sort of Germanicness to it that for sure differentiated it against sort of the more anonymous Japanese competitors in that category.
For sure.
So that part was nice, at least. It's just not nice to look at.
I mean, there have been uglier cars. But,
there have been uglier cars. I struggle to think of any at this particular moment, but I'm sure they exist.
But just look at it next to a Mark 7. Mark 7, which we've both said has the proportions of a hamster, somehow looks like a Lamborghini.
But the detailing of the Lamborghini, it's the proportions of a hamster with the detailing of a Lamborghini. This is the Mark 5 is the proportions of a hamster with the detailing of a hamster.
Yeah.
As well. And, but I love this car. We just took it on a rally. The large barge charge, which you missed because you were driving the new...
I can't talk about it.
Something.
I was in the land of rust in Michigan driving a thing. Yeah, I unfortunately missed it. It was the rally that I sort of invented, right?
Yes.
I mean, I said to you, I drove the 850 CSI on the back roads, and I'm like, let's do a large barge.
We also last year had the 560 SEC on the rally, along with a bunch of more suitable rally cars. And it became clear that between those two things, between the 850 CSI and the just brilliant performance of the 560 SEC, that we should do a large barge charge. We later determined that the charge part was also a reference to one's credit card bill, because I think it was $130 or $140 to fill the 560 SEC with fuel.
And it would go 112
and it
miles.
Would go, yeah, I think it did break 11 miles per gallon on one tank.
That was the high mark, or
that was
low
the
mark?
high mark.
Oh
yes.
my God.
And for comparison, my R129 with the non-CIS injection with the LH injection, it was more like 13.5 to 14.5 mpg, so it was markedly better fuel economy. This is why I always say that I prefer the 93. It's weird to say that fuel economy matters, but when you can't do 200 miles on a tank, it starts to actually affect the quality of the experience, in my opinion.
Wow.
So that's why I prefer the better fuel economy of the LH cars to the CIS cars. In any case, so my R129 was there. We had a R129 300 SL. We had the B5 Audi wagon.
300 SL stick.
Yes, 300 SL stick, dogleg. Mm-hmm. The B5 Audi 2.8 V6 Avant with a manual. And a Jag F-Pace SVR.
Are we allowed to talk about that? I saw videos of that doing donuts.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, I don't know the owner. So.
Donuts were achieved with, and we had an F-Type SVR as well, which is not really in keeping with the spirit of the event, except for that the owner purchased it for $6,000, having been crashed, and repaired it with $500 of eBay parts.
But also, it is 4,900,000 pounds.
Yes, it was also bulky, and it was also the Jags actually were contenders for worst fuel economy together with the 560 SEC.
Superchargers.
Yes.
Yeah,
spending fuel to make more power, which needs more fuel.
To make
it's
that
like
power, yeah.
The opposite of simplify and add lightness for fuel economy. So that was our collection of large barge charge, and then the GTI came along as a sort of backup car for someone who was more inclined to optimize heel towing technique for improving track.
Most of the other cars were automatics, right?
Yes, with the exception of the the Audi. And the dogleg 300 SL. So that was the large barge charge. Highly recommend that activity. It's very funny. I got to use the Fredesteins, which I learned on the way up are mud and snow rated.
So these are the Quatracs?
Quatracs, yes.
Yeah.
Which, don't have the most grip. I was a little bit envious of the Continentals on the other R129, but it was very much possible to maintain a pace that was consistent with the rest of the field, shall we say.
So it didn't slow you down?
It didn't slow us down.
Those are the winter tires that I have on the e-Golf, and I also have those same tires on the bitch basket, on the Cabriolet. Mm-hmm. And I was in the e-Golf with Nick Mercadante, actually, and I flew around a corner, and they just started to squeal a little bit. He's like, man, these PS4Ss have so much grip still. Yeah. I'm like, these are the all-season Quatracs.
Yeah. They're very, they make a lot of noise, not squealing noise. Like the moment you start to, it's more like as soon as you turn in and they start to go like it's not a squeal. It's like you can hear the tires are working, but it's like at very low demand. And that was interesting because you could adjust the volume of it based on how much cornering demand you were making.
Yeah, they're vocal tires.
They are for sure, but only when you're laterally accelerating.
So it's the one comment I'll make about those tires in the e-Golf is that, and we keep meaning to do a tire episode, and we have to come back to this, but I still haven't done my All-Track Pro, the summer tires on that car yet. But in a straight line, I get but it's not like a broken band sound that you get, like that blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But there's just like a not constant resonance that I get from the tires that I didn't get from the Michelin.
I have the same tires on our company service wagon, and I've noticed the same thing on those tires as well.
It's not offensive at all.
No, it's just kind of there.
Yeah. And they definitely, as soon as you get a little
side load, exactly.
Mine don't. It's not
a squealing sound, but it's definitely like a whooshing noise.
You hear the tread. You hear the tread deflect for sure.
It's a whooshing noise.
Okay.
But overall, they held up beautifully to the copious abuse that we applied to them. Always one of my favorite parts of this activity is evangelizing Sacco-era Mercedes-Benzes to people who don't think of them in that way, including ourselves, because it took us years to figure out this was possible, other than our one friend with the Dogleg 300 SL who's been doing this for years. We all thought he was insane, and then we learned that it was actually a really superb rally car. But yeah, getting people who are like, what are you doing in these old automatic, 4,000 pound barges, and then getting them on back rows of them and being like, wow, that's quite the sort of chassis engineering that is incorporated.
I mean, I love how you're like, oh, we just realized I'm going to take this video that we're going to use as an insert. There is Derek. Derek is right there. And now I'm going to show what's in the background is my Sacco era 2.316. Oh, hi, Jake. You want to wave there? Yeah, some of us realized a long time ago that Sacco era Mercedes.
Yeah, but you expect that of the Cosworth.
Yeah, fair point.
As a sort of homologation racing car, but you don't expect it to be baked into the 4,000 pound plus products.
All of that era Mercedes had spectacular chassis balance. Okay, but we're getting away from hot hatches.
Yes, we very much are.
But we can use chassis balance to get back to your Mark V because that's the one big deficiency on that.
Yes,
car.
So. It was on the rally, and as normal, we rotate in and out of everybody's cars. Anyone who's interested to participate can sort of say, I would give up my car and I would drive this one. So everyone gets to experience it. And, one of the attendees, the one with the Jag SUV, the F-Pace SVR.
F-Pace.
As opposed to the F-Type. It was very confusing. On the
stupid naming convention.
But he got into that thing, and he tracks normally a C7 Grand Sport, and they also have a C6 Grand Sport, and they had a CT4 Blackwing that they would also track, and so they're into these high horsepower V8 cars. And he got into the GTI, and he came out. He's like, "This was the drive of the weekend. I was so not expecting to like this thing, and it was just hilarious and fun. And it corners like it's on rails. Of course, he was coming out of barges. Everything corners like it's on rails.
No, but barges. That car is spectacular.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to drive. Except for I bought it as a track car, and on track I find it immensely frustrating because it's such a fun backroads car, and then on track it just has this irretrievable tendency to terminal understeer that's really frustrating, especially because I used to have a Miata track car before.
You cannot get that car to rotate.
Yeah,
I mean, we were talking to Randy Popes about this, and we mentioned this on the podcast a couple episodes ago. Randy had a problem when he was racing them; they just couldn't get them to rotate. Yeah. I tried.
Reverse stagger, like weird tire pressure imbalances, like sway bar fiddling, like just will not rotate.
But on the road, that is one of the most fun backroad cars I've ever driven.
Yeah.
It's weird to say about a turbocharged front-wheel drive car, right?
I know. And so, we paid $4,000 for this car plus an espresso machine, and it was set up with exactly the way you see it now. I think we've aligned it and changed the oil. We haven't even put tires on it. It's due for a timing belt and a water pump for sure, but just hilarious. And it's also much faster than the Miata around track. It's not going to teach you as much at the limit. Yeah, it's one-dimensional at the limit, which is frustrating. But as a rally device and just a general piece of entertainment, I could not recommend that experience more highly.
Let's get back to Mark V for a second. Let's go to Mark VI. Do you have any experience with Mark VI?
I've never driven a Mark VI.
Okay, Mark VI is a facelifted Mark V.
Yeah, and did it work, because it sure looks a lot better.
It's amazing that they use the same glass and doors, right? I mean,
it looks so much like a Mark VII.
But that one got electric power steering. And that was the...
And this is the Mark V had the electric hydraulic.
Each pass, EH, yeah.
Yeah, which is that it's an electric motor driving a hydraulic pump instead of... so you still have the feedback of conventional steering.
From the driving perspective, it is hydraulic power steering.
It's not driven directly.
Driving the pump.
Yeah, instead of off the engine.
Mark VII was the first ground-up all-new car in the whole GTI lineage. Everything else was a PQ sort of series. This is just an evolution, another evolution, another evolution, another evolution. MQB, which is the chassis that underpins Mark VII, is...
And 8.
And 8 now, is bespoke. Or wasn't not bespoke, it was brand new. And I went on the launch of 6 and I went on the launch of 7. And I could not get over how great 7 was when I drove it. And then when we got them home, we were like, okay, this is the best $50,000 car you can buy, and it comes with a 50% off coupon, factory, right? It was just for $25,000, you couldn't touch, and this stands true of all Mark 7s, whether it's a Golf 1.8 TSI or that was the base motor. Yeah, base motor. The later cars had 1.5s in Jettas. I don't remember if Golfs, whatever. Doesn't matter whether it's 1.8, a 2-liter,
it has to be,
or an e-Golf.
But it has to be a Golf, not a Jetta.
Jetta went to MQB for now, but yeah, at the time it wasn't. But that MQB platform is unbelievable in terms of its NVH and refinement and interior material qualities. Mark 7 was better than Mark 7.5, but we're talking detail differences here. And now that I've spent a couple hundred miles in a Mark 7, I'm going to say something that I'm not that surprised to hear me say, but all my friends who own GTIs are. I would genuinely rather drive the e-Golf. It's a tough thing to say because they're the same car, right? This has much quicker steering, and much better seats in terms of they look more bolstered. They're not
a much better gear change.
It has a gear change. Right?
Yes, it's much better, therefore.
And technically a much more vocal engine.
Yes.
But they're effectively the same car. Its suspension is a bit softer on the e-Golf. The e-Golf rotates better in corners with that sway bar. Certainly than the GTI does. The e-Golf.
Well, you have to drive the GTI with the rear sway bar. Have you?
Yeah, I have not done that, but I have. I drove a 034 Motorsport car and your car, but I prefer the suspension tuning on the e-Golf. So with 18s,
it's more like a Sacco era Mercedes.
This is by no the GTI is by no means harsh ever, but that has 18s on it, and my e-Golf has 18s on it in the summer. And the e-Golf rides better and out grips the Golf. It's better weight distribution. It only weighs, I think my car's 3,400 pounds with the big battery and the sub and all the rest of the shit that I have in there. That is 30, 20, 30, 50, somewhere in this. It's 400 pounds difference-ish. But it's weight in the right spot. So the e-Golf actually rides better and outgrips it and is better at the limit. Although, I don't have a diff, right? So, flat out on a back road, this car is going to be quicker because it has an actual locking front diff and about 9 times the power.
I mean, this isn't the person who is going to buy these cars is probably not going to cross shop them anyway because they are sort of different philosophically. For me, it was a range issue.
Well, I was going to say you owned both.
I did own both.
So you're the
and
control
I owned the
for
e-Golf first, and then I ended up with the GTI later. And I do think fondly back on the GTI, and I miss it to some extent for sure.
But not the e-Golf.
I miss having an EV. If it just was a non-viable for what I was going to use the car for, right? When you want something modern and mindless to go drive for 3 or 4 hours to go to, up the coast or to the mountains or just a long sort of road trip type car, like the e-Golf didn't work for that. And it was my only modern car at the time, and so that would be a thing that I like modern cars for because you can get in, fire and forget, and you don't have to worry about am I going to make it or whatever. I mean, I would say a well-maintained Sacco era Mercedes does that, and so I'm doing that exact thing with a 25-year-old car in the form of the C43. But if I had a modern car that had heated seats and sort of just I knew was always going to function, then I wanted it to be able to do that mission. And I also wanted it to be cornflower blue and have Pretoria wheels and, the seats and be a manual. And just the Mark 7 GTI was really ideal for that. And I would definitely own another one and use it for the same mission.
If I had a car that I needed to do everything, or if I had a spot for a car that needed to do everything and had a commute and whatever else, sure. But the problem is I don't want one car that does everything well. But in town, so what I need a Golf for is in town. Like that right there, that has a 6-foot long drive shaft in it right now. And you don't see it sticking through the windshield. In the hatch. Like the usability is like unbelievable. But to me, where that GTI is least happy is first and second gear stuff around town.
Yeah.
And that's where the e-Golf, I would say, is best, but it's the only place it lives. Like it doesn't do highway, it doesn't do fast, back roads, it doesn't do any of that stuff. But where I need a car for around a city, and there's just the e-Golf is so much faster because of the response and the lack of turbo lag.
Yeah.
And
it's for your specific use case.
Yeah, and it doesn't light up the front wheels. I have to turn traction control off. That one has shitty Bridgestones on it. I have Michelin's about to go on it, but It can't put down the power in second.
Yeah.
And so the idea of just flat footing a car and beating everyone through the lights versus the car feels too much. It's like too much lag and too much power for its own good.
Yeah.
And it's not, and this is where I'm just going to go back to my really unpopular opinion. It's not anywhere close to as much fun as the Mark V was.
Yeah, not as much texture. There's definitely a loss of texture.
I think
the Mark V has an abundance.
I think the Mark V.
Yeah, but you can't make a Mark V rotate.
Yeah, but on it okay, there is no perfect GTI, I guess. But if I were buying one for fun, if it's not if it's got to be a modern turbocharged one, it's going to be 5. Otherwise, it's 1 and 2.
What's wrong with 6? Oh, you lost the hydraulics.
You lost the hydraulics and gained.
I just really like looking at the 6 compared to the 5.
I know. It's a flawed lineup.
Yeah. I mean, trade one thing for another. I would do the Mark 7 just to have the sort of modernity and you know. When you get to cars that are 15, 20 years old and it's a Volkswagen product, it's just like check engine lights, you know, like that whole thing. I guess maybe Mark 7s are getting old enough that that's starting to be a part of the existence with them. Oh, yeah. When I had mine, it was 2 years old, and so it wasn't really an issue just yet. Yeah. And so that's
I'm sure
they're well on their way now for the 15s, the early cars that have 130,000 miles on them.
From what I'm hearing, and that was one of the reasons I was willing to buy that from my niece, is they have water pump issues. That's it. Like that's the sort of big thing. Like
they don't have coil packs and misfires on this cylinder and that cylinder and check engine lights.
Probably. I mean, beat the shit out of anything long
VW
enough. I don't know. I'll find out. I mean, I'm sure everyone who owns one knows. And the joke is still the check engine light as part of VW life. But I mean, this car has never had any repairs according to the previous owner. And it's
except for the paint ones.
Well, paint. And I mean, now it just did get a clutch. And it did get a 034 resonator delete because
it wasn't that loud.
You can't even tell.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I feel a little bad about this. You can't. It now went from being completely silent to almost completely silent. They need an exhaust code red. But yeah, I mean, just such a good car. Like it's just a good everyday car. But it reminds me that turbos and manuals just don't sing.
Yeah, driving around in the city, it was something you tolerated because it was good at doing other things, especially with the heavy duty clutch in there, which was a little bit juddery. It just
chattery.
Yeah, chattery.
This one is now too, and this one is programmed. That the programming is coming out. It is way too fast. Way too. Yours was 034 programmed
stage 1. Yeah.
Stage 1. Yeah. No.
Yeah, which promptly confirmed that the clutch was at the end of its life.
How many miles were on your car?
32 when it got the tune.
This one turned 74,000, and I mean one full throttle and clutch
was done. Yeah, the standard clutches in those cars are not up to surviving any state of tune.
Well, now this one will go back to stock tune plus upgraded clutch, and hopefully that means 100,000 miles of not thinking about it. I really want that interior, those seats mostly for the way they look, because the Plaid is amazing in the e-Golf. But hot hatches are magic.
There is a sort of real worldness to them that is. It took me a while to figure out and to meet it, but I totally get it now, and I adore the genre. It just doesn't make sense in a lot of places in the United States. You need to have elevation gain and the terrain that comes with that, and then the tight roads that then come from that. If you don't have that type of road, I think it might be easy to miss the brilliance of the hot hatch formula.
Fair point. I mean, we have to think about, in a city like this, we have to think about parking, about length for parking spots.
Sure.
That's a non-issue in most of the U.S.
Yeah. But also, if you don't do any twisty roads that are bumpy and have elevation gain and stuff like that, then you will never get to meet the coolest part of your GTI.
Yeah, but what are you gonna drive instead? Like that's where you go, like buy a CT5e Blackwing or something.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's not the right price point, but then you could choose depreciated thing with a V8 with lots of power.
Or even a Civic Type R. Sure. I mean, Civic Type R is a great example. Although we don't have snow here, and front-wheel drive cars in the snow. That's why everyone wants
better than rear-wheel drive.
Less fun.
Yes, but more likely to get you there.
Yeah, fair point. We live in a very strange geographical area.
I mean, it has a lot in common, I'd say, with portions of Europe. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why the car works well in this area.
Was the number one selling car in Mini a couple years ago in San Francisco when I looked was Mini. I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is a car that sells.
It's because it's a bunch of people who have houses built in 1907, right after the earthquake collapsed and burned down most of the city, which means that none of them originally had garages, which means when they have garages in them, they excavate underneath the house. And so you have this really weird, gnarly driveway with insane breakover angles and small garages because there was not supposed to be a garage. And so everybody buys tiny parking spots. So you're like, I can have that spot because no one with a real car can fit in it. So you combine all those things and you end up with everybody buying a Mini.
It's so funny. We were walking out of one of the parks in San Francisco yesterday, and in one block there were 5 smart cars. 5 smart cars parked on the street in one block. Yeah. Like this is
it's
like
a city car.
It's and you don't even see that in Europe. Like, but it's all these.
In Europe, there's enough other small cars that you don't see that many smart cars.
Exactly.
There's any number of other small cars.
Which is wild. This one street, just one block, just had a bunch of parking spots that would never have fit a Mini or a Golf or anything else. And so you have somebody who's got this house. Like, okay, well, if I want to park in the street,
I have guaranteed free parking in front of my house at all times
until all the asshole neighbors buy.
Every other neighbor on the street buys a smart car.
And you can't park them sideways in the U.S.
Not legally.
Not legally.
I did that I was with a client who did that in his Crossblade, which is the Crossblade is the no windshield, no doors version of the smart car. Then they made like some relatively small number. I think it was 2,000 or something of them. But he parked it perpendicular to the curb, and he's a collector.
In the U.S.?
In the U.S. He's a collector with like lots of Lamborghinis and Ferraris and stuff like that. And he's like, this is my favorite car, and my whole collection is this smart car that has no windshield. And of course, it has a very suitable smart car story, which is that it was a tender on a yacht, like when the people on big yachts, right, when they land around the world, they use it the way a Fiat Jolly would be. To drive around the marina, and you just, so you don't have to walk around when you're not on your yacht.
I.e. it's a golf cart. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so and then it was, they weren't sold in the United States, the Crossblade. And it broke while it was here, and they left it at some shop to be fixed. And then, the shop, when they finished it, they couldn't get hold of the owners, and the owners forgot that they had left it.
Oh my God.
And so it was lien sailed, and then ended up in the United States through that avenue.
That's
so there's
amazing.
a very small number of Crossblades in the United States because they're not 25 years old yet, so you can't import them. But there's like a cult following for people who are super into Crossblade smart cars.
I love that the one Chiron owner who is now since sold to Chiron drives a smart ED every day. Like that was just hilarious to me. Well, I must have something to get to the shops.
Yep.
He's not British, but in my mind he could be. Okay, well, I hereby declare that after spending some more time with the Mark 7, that the Mark 5 was more fun. The e-Golf is a better city car, but I maintain there is no better car for a geographical region like San Francisco.
Yeah, for car doing things. Yeah, I would absolutely own another one.
I look forward to the day for you to have another one because then you can stop being such an old car weenie.
I would do it. I mean, it's just I'd need to be a rabbit. It'd need to be one of the 500, and of which I think half were manual and half were DSG. Cornflower blue.
Is it? It's all about cornhole blue.
I want the blue, and I want that interior, and I want LED headlights.
That's why Sport.
Yeah, which they started doing in 2017.
17 Sport was cloth seats, no sunroof,
but
LEDs.
It doesn't have the good headlights.
Yeah, those are the good ones. They're adaptive.
They look different.
They do the left, right, spinny, up, down.
From mine.
And they have the corner marker. You turn the wheel, and there's a separate H1 bulb that lights up.
So that works, but I just can't do black.
They were available in all colors. That was
not blue. Not that blue.
What I want is a Mark 7.5 Euro lighted, so Euro tail lighted, Sport with a sunroof in Great Falls Green.
Yes, this Great Falls Green is the other must-have color. The problem is any car that has a sunroof has a leather interior.
Yeah, which was dumb.
Yeah,
product planners who don't know that you leave a sunroof open, then you burn your ass on hot leather. Stupid.
Anyway, we'll call it here. We like GTIs.
Go and watch.
Shocker.
Shocker. But I also like Jeep Cherokees, and we both have formative early young experiences. Was that
with
year
2.5 liter Cherokees?
Was your first? If we could do the math on this, but my breakdown was probably around the same time as your mom had hers. So
it was 89 to 94.
Okay, I was a little bit later. So
November of 94.
Despite the fact that you're 41 years younger than I am, your formative Jeep experience was before mine. Pretty
well. I was
200.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week in all probable likelihood, and by that I mean you'll see us, and only if you're watching on YouTube.